Assalamu alaikum students, welcome to another lecture. Alright, so my dear students, how are you? Are you alright? How about other subjects that you are having in this course? Alright, yes, I know you are having what? Stylistics is one of the course, very important. And then we call it, alright, TEFL-II we are having this course. We had TEFL-I in our last semester. Fine, so come to our topic. So in the last week, what did we do? Who would tell me? Yes, we talked about four stages. No, we talked about 3 stages. And what did we do exactly? Yes, we reviewed all these 3 stages of an oral lesson, right? Who would tell me what is the first stage of an oral lesson? Yes, warm-up stage. Alright, what exactly we talked about the stage? Okay, presentation stage. Fine. What is the next stage we talked about? Practice stage. Fine. The next stage was production stage. Okay, fine. So, and these are the 3 stages you told me, but what exactly we did? We reviewed, alright, we had a glance. We had a bird eye view of all these 3 stages. Fine. This was our last lecture. It was lecture number 6. So as usual, we are going to review this for a while and then we'll move on to today's lecture. That would be on lesson planning, right? So lecture 7 is on lesson planning, very important. Students, of course, the TEFL is important, right? Because this subject helps us in teaching English as a foreign language. We saw it at a macro level in the previous semester. Now we are at micro level, right? We are seeing how to teach this language exactly in a class, right? So this lecture and the lectures to come, and then of course we'll be talking about micro teaching as well, what exactly the micro teaching is, right? So today our lecture is on lesson planning, how to plan for a lesson, right? How to make a lesson, right? We'll be in fact discussing lecture planning for 2 lectures today and the next lecture. So let's talk about the previous lecture. We talked about 4 stages of an oral lesson. We could not discuss much about the warm-up stage. Generally, we might have discussed that warm-up stage is an important stage. Why we need a warm-up stage? Because a warm-up stage in fact prepares students for the lesson which is going to be discussed, which is going to be taught in the class. So once you prepare the students, you prepare their minds, fine, and teacher can use different ways to, to have the students' attention, because the purpose of the warm-up stage is just to prepare the minds for the lesson which is going to be talked about. So there can be different ways. It can be through a quotation, right? Or it can be through something which is very familiar. Or maybe the teacher comes and he creates a situation, right? So he talks about yes, for example, the lesson plan is about a dialogue between a customer and a travel agent. So maybe the teacher comes in the class and what he does, that he says, well, I had to go somewhere and I went to a travel agent and I needed, the details of the fare, and of course I needed a ticket, a return ticket for UAE, for Canada. So in this way the teacher initiates that discussion. So listening to this discussion in fact, yes, prepares the students that today we are going to talk about this dialogue, where how to get your ticket reserved, how to get your seat reserved for an international travel. Fine. So this is what situation can be created, and that in a stage we call it warm-up stage. And here students in fact get ready for the lesson and they overcome their boredom. Maybe the previous class was tiring for them, and after that class, you see, there is a break, and this warm-up stage, again, it's a relief for the students. So my dear student, that language learning is never easy, right? That's why, of course, we have to teach this language in an environment where students would not be bored, right? And we have to, in fact, prepare grounds for it, right? We have to create set right conditions for the language learning process, fine? And if there is no right condition, so we won't be able to achieve our goals. Like we talked about methods in the last semester, and you saw in some methods, right, the environment was very ideal. If I go back to Suggestopedia, right, you saw that environment was very conducive, very calm, and there was peripheral learning was there, and you see students were having fun, having chat, and they were provided a good seating environment. So that's why the learning environment is very important. It matters a lot as far as the learning of a language is concerned. So students, in the last lecture, what we talked about the purpose of presentation stage, practice stage, and of course production stage. So what is the purpose? So naturally, of course, the purpose of presentation stage is to present, right? Is to teach students, I mean, the exponent, that of course the model sentence. So it is simple, the purpose of what? Presentation stage. So in the practice stage, what happens? Yes, in the practice stage, yes, the teacher, of course, in fact, makes students practice, and there is a controlled practice. And of course, in the production stage, we see that students independently, what they do, they practice the language item which the teacher, in fact, has presented. So this is the simple purpose. And then we saw, in fact, some features of all these 3 P's, right? And we saw the feature of presentation stage. Of course, I mean, the ball is in the teacher's court. The paradigm is, in fact, with the teacher, and he, in fact, communicates. But in the practice stage, yes, the teacher stands alone for a while, and you see, and he makes students practice, and then he comes forward and intervenes whenever he finds, he corrects, I mean, that of course the practice stage. Then in the production stage, we see that, of course, that the teacher, of course, I mean, lets students work independently. So there are some features, of course. And then we saw activities of the practice stage. The teacher may write in the presentation stage. As far as activities are concerned, teacher may write on the whiteboard, he may write on the blackboard, right, or he might give a handout. So it can be an activity. In the practice stage, of course, it can be a game, it can be, in fact, a role play. And of course, production stage, what happens? Students design, in fact, students, I mean, perform their activities on their own. Maybe in the practice stage, the teacher provides them an activity, whereas in production stage, students are free, in fact, to have their own activity. For example, I already told you that, well, in the practice stage, a game might be provided by the teacher to practice, whereas in the production stage, what happens is that, you see, that game is created by the students. So this is what we see. We have, of course, activities are there. And then we talk about role of a teacher, right, in these 3 P's, and we saw that the teacher is informant, right, in presentation stage, and teacher is what? Teacher is conductor in what? In the practice stage. And in the last stage, of course, we see production stage, the teacher role is a bit passive, because the teacher, I mean, in fact, provides a freer environment to his students, to his learners, so that they can produce, they can speak. And then we saw degree of control, of course, in the presentation stage. Higher, I mean, the teacher is the authority, and of course the teacher model clause is there. So degree of control is higher as compared to the practice stage, of course. But again, if you compare practice with the production stage, so almost the teacher control is low in the production stage. But yes, in the practice stage, as we saw, that teacher controls the environment, because he has to control. Otherwise, sometimes if the teacher is unable to control, the students might not practice, and majority may not be benefited from that. So this is what we call it, degree of control. And then correction is also important, that well, in the presentation stage, yes, students can ask question, and while asking a question, if there is a problem, teacher can correct. Correction is allowed. Fine. And then of course in the practice stage, again it's a controlled practice, so correction is allowed. However, in the final stage, of course, the teacher corrects only when there is a need. Otherwise, you see, he lets the activity go on, and maybe at the end he can find, of course, he can address the problem, or he can correct any mistake that he has. But again, the teacher needs to be very, very rational, very, very careful while correcting mistakes of the students. It's important. Then the length and place in lesson, of course, is important, that you see how much duration should we give to the presentation stage, and where it should be placed. Can we place it at the end of the lesson, or should we place it at the beginning? So we decided that presentation stage always comes at the first, right? And duration may be short, and it depends, right? You need to know your the level of your learners, right? What do they already know? Fine. What is their assumed knowledge, their background, their age group, their understanding level, their exposure to language, their culture, right? And of course, some learners are very sharp. So for a sharp learner, maybe the presentation stage can be short. They need more time for the practice stage and for the production stage. So again, it depends for the presentation stage. Practice stage, again, of course, if the learner are slow learners, so of course maybe that this practice stage can be shorter and presentation stage can be longer, right? However, again, if the learner are good learners, they can pick things. They are in fact good at the partake. So definitely you can reduce the time of this session. Moving on to the production stage, again you see that duration of this stage, if the learners are quick learners, they learn well, and I see they have exposure and they want to move on, they want to excel in. So more time can be given to production stage as compared to the other practice or the presentation stage. So this is what we talked about in the last lecture. Rather, we had a glance on all the three stages of an oral lesson. So these points we try to see in all the three P's, and I hope you have understood it. It's very important topic for your examination point of view. So you need to differentiate between a presentation, a production, and of course a practice stage. So do know these things, and do observe. If a teacher is following these stages, and then again I told you that this is not the final verdict, that you see this is what the three stages are there. If you feel that these three stages can help you in your foreign language teaching, so you can follow them. Otherwise, you can see how these, if you feel that you are doing well without this, then you can add that to your experience in these three stages. So this is what we talked about in our last lecture. Today, my dear student, there is an image in front of you, and of course after seeing the image, I'm sure you are clear that what are we going to talk about. Yes, there is a template for lesson plan. Very important topic, my dear students. Of course, you see that planning is important, and you all know principles of management. And of course, principles of management is that you see there is planning, there is organizing, there is in fact controlling. So these are what the principles of management, that here there is a P for planning, O for organizing, L for learning, of course, right? See, and then C for controlling. These are what principles of management is there, that you plan things, of course, right? Organize things, right? And then you see what? Planning, organizing, leading. Fine, of course, and then controlling. So a good teacher, in fact, should be a good planner, right? So, and that, of course, a manager makes a plan, and his plan is in front of you. A teacher is also a good leader, he's a good manager. So what he does, that he plans, of course, and his plan is what? His lesson plan. right? So a good teacher in fact prepares, he makes his lesson plan, and while making that lesson plan he has to keep in mind certain important points that we'll be talking about in this lecture and the coming lecture as well. So what is a lesson plan in fact? Yes, I mean teacher can only be effective in the classroom if they are prepared for the class. So preparation is a must, right? Somebody said that of course for a class you need to prepare, right? Here it's a debatable thing. Some people even feel that experience, of course, once initially you see you need more preparation, and later on once you become experienced you may not need that much preparation. Yes, to some extent it's okay, but as far as planning is concerned, you see every good teacher, of course, I mean must have a plan, you see, and he tries to execute that plan in the class. So if he comes prepared in the class, so he really enjoys the class. And if he goes to the class without prior preparation, so the class would be difficult for him. And the teacher in fact, of course, I mean teacher can judge that problem if he feels that, I mean he when teacher I mean struggles in the class and he feels that he has nothing to say, or he fails to execute the class, so this means that there was lack of proper planning. So some teachers, I mean I must say they might manage it because of the exposure and all that. But again, good language teaching particularly, though in all teaching of course, if you are teaching management sciences, you are teaching economics, you are teaching literature, so every subject demands a lesson. So if you have a planning for your whole semester, planning for your whole course, so you would enjoy, students would be benefited, right? So because lesson planning, once you make a lesson, then you incorporate so many things in that lesson, and that incorporation, that effort ultimately helps your students, right? So professionally speaking, in fact, if you want to adopt, if you want to be teacher in your career, and particularly the language teacher, so you need to have a lesson plan for every class. I mean, initially, yes, you might find it hard, but once you make it once, then in the coming classes things would be easy for you and you can add value to it, right? So I mean I won't say that you do it one-time effort, but when you learn to do it, you see you prepare a lesson plan, so it means you give some time, and that time would ultimately, you see, you are passing on to your students. And then if you prepare a lesson plan, my dear students, in the class you would be happy. In the class you would not look at your watches. In fact, sometimes it happens that the teacher finds the time should be over and time is still there. Why? Because there is no proper planning, there is no proper management, you see. So that's why if of course, like we talked about the three stages, and we allocated time for all these stages, and you remember that we gave time for the presentation and the practice and the production stage. So if you are a good lesson planner, so you may not realize that, I mean, how time goes on, and you see one bell rings and you might know it's almost end. So that's why, of course, a good teacher, what he does, that he makes a proper lesson plan and he tries to execute. And when you make a lesson plan and you, while executing, you might find some problem in that lesson plan, maybe some lesson plans fail. So if you feel that, what you do? You improve that lesson plan in the coming classes. So it means again the beneficiaries are the students, because I mean if one lesson plan doesn't work in some situation, maybe in other situation that would be a failure, right? So therefore lesson plan shows your preparation for the class, and if you are a prepared mind, so again I would say you would not confuse your students. If you are not prepared, you might confuse your students. And here again I would say that, I mean, list of contents may also help you. If you have a list of contents with you, and accordingly if you have lesson plans, so you can work on, and ultimately students would be happy. So this is what we call, my dear students, the lesson plan, of course, is a teacher's detailed description of the course of instruction for one class. I mean one class, 60 minutes class, 40-minute class. So this is what the lesson plan is. What is it? It is a detailed description of the course of instruction. Course of instruction, very important for one class. And a daily lesson plan is developed by a teacher to guide class instruction, right? And then details vary depending on the preference of the teacher, subject being covered, and the need or curiosity of the student. So of course these details vary from subject to subject. Again, details vary from the preference of the teacher, right? If the teacher wants to give more preference to production stage, so he allocates more time for the production stage. If the teacher feels the students are beginners, they need more time in the presentation stage, so he spends more time on the presentation stage. So this is what mean. It's about lesson plan, that it is a plan, a course of instruction for one particular class, right? So now the question is what a lesson plan should provide. When you make a lesson, or you will be making lesson, maybe of course you are making lessons plans, those of you who are teachers, those of you who teach language in fact, or those of you who teach English as a foreign language, so maybe you are in the habit of making timetable. Some of you might not be, so we should know what a lesson plan should provide. So the first thing is a clear and explicit presentation of aims and the procedure by which they are achieved. So mind you, the aims and objectives, aims are what? General, you can say, and objectives are specific. So that's why when you make your lesson plan, your aims should be clear, right? So, and then they should be explicit, mean clear, right? One is of course the clear, that your mind should be clear. Teacher's mind should, this is a big problem in language teaching, that sometimes the teacher teaches, and if you ask him that what are the aims of this lesson plan particularly, and teacher might not be able to answer it. So that's why when you make a lesson plan, your aims must be clear, right? And that's why the word explicit presentation of aims, they should be on paper, right? What are the aims you want to achieve and procedure by which they are achieved. This is the aim. For example, aim is to improve fluency of the students. Then what would be the procedure? What would be the framework for it? How that method, what to do and how to do, you can say that, what to achieve, right? What is the aim that you want to achieve? Maybe you want to improve their vocabulary, then what is the procedure for it? So that's why the aim should be explicit, right? And second, they should be clear, and of course the aims and their procedure by which they are achieved. So what should be achieved within a lesson? Of course, definitely talking about aims, every lesson plan of course has a separate aim. So we need, being a lesson the planner, when you plan a lesson, you need to ask yourself, being a teacher, what is the aim of this lesson plan, right? So when you keep the contents of your topics in front of you, then you might ask yourself why I have included communication, for example, why I have included vocabulary exercises, why I have included, for example, sentence structure exercises, why have I included, for example, the grammatical problems. So once you think over it, once you review it, you will see that this is the aim, of course, of this lesson plan. That is important. So second thing, my dear student, the need analysis of the student. Yes, of course, this is very important, that you need to, we call it need analysis of the students, that what are the needs of the students. So being a teacher, of course, we must keep in mind the needs of the learner, that what does he need. Fine, whatever lesson plan you have designed or you have made, is it as per the needs of the learners or it is not? So if it is as per the needs of the learners, so of course they would be motivated, they would take interest, they would be keen to do that. And if they feel that whatever the lesson plan may not be up to their needs, or it is not up to their expectation, or sometimes they may not realize the significance of that, right? If they may not realize the importance of that, then you need to make them realize that this is the lesson that we'll talk about, and these are what the usefulness, how this lesson is useful and how it is relevant, it is important. Right, students? So need analysis of the students is a must for your while making lesson plan. So that's why we're talking about that what should a lesson plan provide. So it must provide aims, right? So what are the aims mean? The clear aims and of course explicit presentation of aims and procedures by which they are achieved. Then of course that the fundamental question a teacher should ask of a lesson plan are what? That are the aims of the lesson valid in terms of student needs? This is very important. That if the students are struggling in vocabulary, they are weak in vocabulary, and your aims are to improve their sentence structure. So what is the problem? The problem is, my dear students, that you see there is a gap, right? Students they want to improve their vocabulary, whereas the teacher, in fact, the lesson plans is there to help them in writing sentence structure. Or it could be other way around. It could be other way around. If the students are struggling in of course constructing a sentence, and the teacher, in fact, and that lesson plan of a particular lesson helps them improve the aims are what? To improve their vocabulary. So this is what needs to be considered, that what are the aims, and do these aims of course fulfill the needs of the learner. So need analysis of the learner is a must, is important. So that's why the questions, you see, and can these aims be realistically achieved with this group of students and the time allowed? This is important, right? You need to be realistic. Some smart theory is very important. Whatever aims you have set, can you achieve them with this class of students and in this time? Right? This is very important. Sometimes, of course, you have monolingual students, and sometimes you have multilingual students. Students come from different cultures, so at times you feel that it is not realistic, for example, teaching students, in fact, right, of course, and their first language is different, and the teacher's first language is different, so again it's not an easy job, right? TEFL in the context we call it, where the language is not language of communication. So this is what you see when you teach a learner, in fact, and of course whose first language and your first languages are different. So again, this can create a problem. So that's why you see you have to be realistic, and you need not to exaggerate. Sometimes if you will, and in a class I'll be able to help them in writing conditional sentences, so which is not realistic, right? And do the activities in the procedure for the lesson match and achieve this? This is important. That whatever the activities are there, do these activities really help, right, to achieve the aims of the lesson plan? If the activities are contrary, activities are different, and aims are of course different, so this is one. For example, that the aim is to improve writing, and the activities of course focus on what? Dialogues, on discourse chains, and on role plays, and on discussions. Right? So of course, the teacher here, these activities can be for accuracy, can be for what? Fluency, right? So if the teacher wants, the aim is to improve writing skills, so then the activities should be designed accordingly. So dear students, of course, this is that when you make your lesson plan, so you must ask yourself that what does this lesson plan, in fact, how does this lesson plan help us, you see, and what a lesson plan should have, you see, and then of course you see you can give a clear and explicit presentation, and you need to know that of course what are the aims, and fine, and an explicit presentation of the aims, and then of course next thing is that what is the procedure by which they are achieved, and you see you have some fundamental questions you can ask. So this is what the first thing that the aims important of a lesson plan. Next thing is, my dear students, what is preparing a checklist. Of course, when you make a lesson plan, there is a checklist. Initially you need it, but after some time this checklist should be on your fingertips, and you can easily find out. So what is the checklist? What and where to teach. Again, it's important. What mean what to teach, and then where exact the place. See, the order of events, aids to be arranged, page number, and other details is important. What, which chapter, which topic of the book, and where, in a language class or in a school, in a university, in a college. So again, it's important. Of course, if you are in a language center, so of course the purpose is fine to help the learners speak that language, to help the learners write that language, you see. But if you come to in a school or a college where to help the learners pass their exam, so that's why of course you need to know that, you see, what is the checklist, right? What is to be taught, and of course where to teach, that is the and then which aids to be arranged, right? I mean, for example, teaching, in fact, teaching what? I mean, error analysis. EA, of course, the one can be that, you see, you can give them handouts. And while teaching error analysis, then which order should be followed, right? Should we move from simple to complex, or from complex to simple sentences? When you teach conditional sentences, so generally we move from simple to, I mean, we talk about first condition and second and the third condition. When you talk about sentences, for example, so should we start with complex sentence, or you begin with simple sentences, and from simple to compound sentence, and compound to complex sentence, so and maybe sometime over complex sentence you talk about. But the point is, yes, where to start, what should be the order, and which aids, teaching aids to be arranged for it. And then of course if you are following a book, then what is exact the page number. So this is again a checklist is a must, that what to teach and where to teach, and what should be the order of events, right? What should be the order, and then which the page number that you will use that, and of course which really are, which teaching aids would you use, and how these aids are arranged. So this is what we call it, a checklist. Then timeline for each stage is very important. We talk about these three stages, we need not to discuss more. Well, students, so time frame is important for in your lesson plan. You need to decide that how much time we should allocate for the first stage, similarly for the second stage and for the final stage. And it depends, right? It is not hard and fast that you need to give more time to the presentation, or you need to give less time to the practice, or you need to give more time to the production stage. So it depends, right? It depends on what the nature of the class that you are having, duration of the class that you have, the students that you are teaching, fine, and all these factors you keep in mind while, I mean, giving timeline for these stages. So then, my dear students, the next phase that the point that you must keep in mind is a record for future reference and reuse. Mind you, we are talking about what a lesson plan should provide. We talked about aims, right? Then we talked about prepare a checklist, and third thing, the timeline, and the fourth point is a record for future reference. What is it in fact? Post-teaching evaluation may be help for future. For example, when you have, after having a lesson, right, on, for example, you can call it negative sentences or complex sentences. So you have, I mean, evaluation, you see, the students give you the feedback, and sometimes you feel, you realize the problem, the good points, the bad points, so you better take those points down. So these points would help you in your future lesson plans. These, I mean, of course, the points that you have taken down after every class would definitely improve your teaching in the coming classes. So this is very important that you keep a record of that. So you can write down that record. So with that record, you can improve your teaching, and with every class you need to improve your teaching. So this is a very important point, that you see, you make a record of it, you write down that comment, right? I mean, maybe you had an activity and it worked well, right? Sometime you think of an activity and you plan an activity and it didn't work, right? And sometime you of course, somebody you hit upon an idea, you hit upon an activity, and it works well in the class. So therefore you need to make a point, you need to write those things down with you to improve your future teaching. In fact, so that is what we call it, a record for future reference and reuse. So the next point is what make a model to be used by the teachers. Of course, definitely you need, I mean, in our institutions, in schools, in colleges, of course, particularly, there is a template, you see, where the teachers can have a template, and in that template, initially, I mean, you remember, I showed you an image. Over there it was a lesson plan template. So that template helps the teachers help in fact language teachers to fill in the information. That you see, for example, aims are given and there are columns and there is a line. Teacher can write aims in fact, so that in fact helps the teachers, because teacher can fill in that template easily, and they can follow a uniform pattern. It is available, so it is not a bad thing. It's a good thing that if you provide teachers a template, and if it is not provided by the concerned authority, but you can do that, you can make your own. You can make your own template in the light of this instruction, in the light of course other resources, and it varies in fact, of course, but generally the point that we talked about and we will be talking about, they are part of a lesson plan. So like you see, a model to be used by the teachers is very important. Administration can provide you that model, and you can make your own model as well. And then what useful sections for any lesson plan, if you see on the screen, you can have what the level of course is important. So level of here for reference purpose, that which level of course you are teaching. In fact, it is generally of course we call it that foundation level, or then we have elementary level, and then we have advanced level. So you can level the students as per the placement test that you will have before admitting students in your center. So that is mean what is the level. And then overall time for the lesson, this is also important, that you see in public sectors, sometime you have a lesson of course for 40 minutes or 45 minutes, right? In private sector, sometimes the lesson goes to, maybe you meet 3 times a week, and of course the time duration for one lesson may be 75 minutes. So it varies, right? And you have to consider these factors in mind, that how much time will I have for this class, you see. And because in business schools, business organizations, of course, if you teach language over there, even you have to complete that credit hours. So for that credit hours, what you have to do is that you have 2 classes maybe in a week. So these 2 classes, of course, duration is almost 180 minutes. So you divide that 180 minutes into 2 sections, and you have one, of course, 75 minutes class. So you can decide accordingly. Then the aims are also important. You see, they include a clear statement of aims. Does the lesson involve revision, presentation, practice, production, or a combination of these? This is very important. In fact, you see that does the lesson only involve revision? Sometime at the end of the course you just simply revise. So the lesson plan can be revision, or just lesson plan presentation, or is a combination of all presentation, practice, or production. If the structure is being taught, example, a verb tense, which form of this structure is to be practiced? The negative, the question, the short answer, etc. We'll be talking about some lesson plans, and you will come to know exactly that. We see, for example, at time you will teach use of models. At time you will be teaching use of must and mustn't. Like you see on the screen, like, well, of course, that if you just only it is the lesson in fact incorporates presentation or the combination of all these stages. Or if you are teaching, if you are EA teacher, for example, if you teach error analysis, if you are teaching writing skills, right? So then you have to decide on that which exact structure that you see you are going to teach, and that is part of your lesson plan. The examples are given. Which function of the structure is being taught? For example, if teaching the will function future is to be being in the future. If you are teaching will for the volition, for example, or will for the future, right? So the function is also important, right? Structure is also important, and then the function. If teaching the will future, right? Is it being in the function of prediction or new decision on future actions? Generally, of course, the teachers, what they do, that they talk of the use of future simple. Over there they say that future simple, this will can be will for volition, or maybe will for decision, right? Or maybe will for what? Future, right? So this is what you see when you make a lesson plan, my dear students. So you need to understand that you see what is the exact structure, fine, and then what is exact function of that. This is very important. And then which exponent of function are going to be taught, formality or informality level. This is important because when you teach of course an exponent, when you teach of course a language item, so then you decide on, is it a very formal word or it's an informal word or it's of course conversational word. So that is also the level, because definitely when you teach language, so you keep these things in mind, right? Being a language teacher, of course, and we are of course having this course in this master's program. So remember that the level, formality level and the informality level, and at times you can ask students to find out that which is it a formal sentence or is it an informal sentence. So that is also you need to convey to the students. Then will it also be necessary to teach co-function, for example responses to the main function? If you teach only the main function, for example, and do you need co-function, mean for example you are teaching how to invite somebody to your wedding or to a party. So co-function can be that yes, they should be reply to it. In fact, if you are teaching them how to invite, so the co-function is that how to reply. Fine, a reply can be positive, reply can be negative. At times you see you give reasons, fine, and the person invites you again and then you accept it. So that's why of course when you teach a function, you decide on will the co-function is also important or not, or maybe the co-function will be in some other class. This is important. So when in teaching and inviting, it is advisable to teach students how to accept and refuse an invitation too. Is that clear? What do we call it? Yes, teach co-function. So this is what, my dear students, we talk about that. Well, you see, provide them a model and the useful section of any lesson plan, and that is we call it the aims are important. Then will the lesson focus on lexes, pronunciation, stress and intonation too, right? Again, of course, because when you make a lesson plan, so you decide on that. You see, will this lesson in fact talks about the lexes only, I mean the words, or pronunciation, right? Stress and intonation too. It's important. These are all, we call them, I mean, sub skills in fact are involved. So when you teach one language item, so one exponent of a language, so will you incorporate other in fact sub skills of that skill that you are teaching? For example, will you incorporate the stress level, pronunciation, right, intonation too? So this is also you need to see it. Well, students, so if the lesson in fact aims to practice the reading, listening or writing skills, then the sub skills to be practiced should be specified in the aim of the lesson. So this is again, I mean, my dear students, that we're talking about suggestions for the content of a lesson plan, right? These are what we have the suggestion that we should mention, that once you talk about the reading skills, what are the sub skills of the reading would be incorporated. When you talk of and your lesson plan is on listening skill, and then which sub skills of listening would be incorporated. Similarly, writing skills as well. So that is of course important. We call it these are some of the suggestions for the content of a lesson plan, right? Before that, we discussed what lesson plan should provide. We saw that timeline is a must, checklist is a must, and record for future. And then what else we talk about? What are the suggestions for the content of a lesson plan? These are some of the suggestions, that a model, a template is important, then useful sections are there, and which of course exponents of function are going to be taught, formality or informality, and then will it be necessary to teach co-functions. And also another suggestion is that with the lesson plan forms only on lexes, pronunciation, intonation too, or if the aims to practice skills, what about the sub skills as well? Another suggestion is what? Aids, right? So whether they be books, handbooks, realia. This is very important, that which teaching aid you will be using in your lesson plan, and that aid must be readily available, right? If you are using whiteboard or the blackboards, of course it should be in your class. You have to have that whiteboard or the blackboard, or if you are going to use a book, then books would be available, right? For example, I mean, these days you have in the language classes, the BBC books are there. They are good books, BBC Stage 1 and Stage 2, and then there are so many other books are there exploring the English. In fact, so some books are really effective for language classes particularly, so you can use that. There's a book I want to give you, Choosing Your English, right? It's a good book that gives you, of course, English for different situations. There is a book, Going to Work in English. Of course, that book helps you, in fact, how to hunt job. So these books are really effective for your language learning, for improving English, and particularly for applying in different organizations. Handouts, of course, if you have the handouts, do you have enough number of handouts or not? Get the copies as per the number of the students. The copy should not be less, should not be more. Fine. And then any other thing that you have, I mean, maybe you have a chart, maybe you have in fact any other realia that you can bring. Maybe you have a model with you. So these aids should be, I mean, again, aids should be easy to use, right? Don't bring a very complex aid that students would find it hard to use it. So again, right, teaching aids are important, because when aids are there, so the environment becomes more formal, interest level of the teacher and the taught increase, so ultimately learning improves. So another, what we call it, suggestion is that anticipated what problem, right? So definitely when you make a lesson plan, you always anticipate, you always expect what could be the problems. This is what a useful section of the lesson plan, because its existence requires teachers to think a problem that students are likely to have during the course of a lesson plan, right? For example, a general problem is that when you teach the past tense, so the general problem is that people, of course, when they convert the affirmative of a past tense into negative sentence, so what happens is that, you see, they do not change that past form into the base form. What they do that is they did not worked, right? This is what generally students do. So the teacher anticipates problems. In fact, what are the possible problems? And of course, if the teacher is from the same culture, so it's easy to anticipate the problems. However, when the teacher is from a different culture, so it could be difficult for the teachers to anticipate the problems, but not impossible. Teachers still can anticipate problems, and once they anticipate problems, what happens? So a teacher, in fact, thinks of plans, right? So again, it's a pre-planning, that if this happens, how would I address this problem? How would I fix the problem? So problems are anticipated, and if, of course, it is not hard and fast that, you see, whatever problems you anticipate, you expect the same. Sometime another problem can occur, and then, of course, you see, I mean, over there you have to think that what to do with this problem, right? So a big class, of course, general problem is that, you see, attention level of the student is low, because if there are 40 sitting in the class, so and if you have to teach them the language, though it is difficult, but at times you have to. So then you anticipate what could be the problem and how would I address it. Then the concept, in fact, for example, the common problem which students have in forming the negatives and interrogatives of the present simple and in the producing the third person of the same tense, right? For example, you see, they cannot, you see, the example, he works, right, and he does not work. So against when he does not works. Initially, it is difficult for the student to make a sentence with he works, he work, right? And then, of course, secondly, if they have to convert that into negative, so he would say he does not works again. So these are what they see. The problems can be there while teaching present. I mean, again, going to form and the present continuous tense and, of course, progressive tenses again create some confusion for the students. So the teacher has to keep these in mind. Then pronunciation, of course, is important as far as, I mean, problem is concerned, that can be a problem that can be anticipated, right? That, you see, of course, students have problem, they have dialectical problems. In fact, you see, they have, of course, problem in their accent. So you see, here the teacher can anticipate this and find out how to help the students out. So in pronunciation of contracted forms, and of course stress is at times difficult. The students cannot pronounce, for example, can't, they cannot pronounce couldn't at times, right? So again, these are what anticipated problems that you see the teacher, of course, he anticipates. So that's why he needs to keep in mind. Another, of course, main suggestion is that is for procedure, right? Procedure for the of course content of a lesson. That procedure of the lesson can perhaps be laid out in a column format, right? So what is a procedure, right? What is what we call it, the scheme that will follow. What would be the way, right, that would be followed. So what happens, the stages of the lesson is important, right? Presentation, right? Fluency, practice, of course, free oral practice, written practice, production, in fact, right? So therefore this is what the stages are there. Was simple, the teacher what, like here, I mean, on the screen you can see that, well, there is a presentation stage, and then of course maybe there is a of course for the fluency, for the practice, and then of course, I mean, freer oral practice, in fact, right? So here this class is, I mean, this is, the situation talks about all the four, the three stages are there, and then there is the writing practice, and finally you have production, or the details of each stage, right? For example, in the presentation stage, I'll be talking about talking about in fact direct and indirect narrations, or I'll be talking about active and passive voice. So in the practice stage, of course, maybe there is a handout available, and students would in fact help each other, and the teacher can help them out, and they would try to convert those sentences from direct to indirect narration, or from active to passive voice. Then in the production stage, of course, maybe you see once another handout is there, where the students are supposed to perform activities accordingly. So this is what should be clear in your mind, that what will I do in the first 10 minutes, and then what would be the activity for the middle 10 minutes, and what would be the activity for the last 10 minutes. So again, this should be clear in the teacher's mind, that what is the procedure, what is the exact scheme, and what are the details of each stage, and timing each activity. I told you earlier the timeline is a must for each stage, so do give the timeline, and then interaction patterns, will it be open pairs or it should be in groups, right? So this is what, my dear student, is the procedure. I told you earlier that what are the aims, right, and what are the procedures to achieve those aims is a must. So procedures must be in line with the aims, right? And of course procedures must have a sequence, right? What would we do in the first 10 minutes, in the remaining 10 minutes, and of course in the last 10 minutes. So you have a time, and in this way I think the teacher enjoys teaching, and the learners enjoys learning. So it has benefits on either side. So if you have a proper, but the teacher has to give some time, and he has to make a lesson plan. This is what important, right? Then of course interaction patterns are there. It can be open pairs or it can be group. So these can be added after the lesson for future references, right? They would refer to the weaknesses in the lesson, or perhaps just alternative strategies. For example, if you have made a procedure for one lesson plan, and that could not work for some reasons, so definitely this is an experience for you, that of course in the next class, whenever you make a lesson plan, we will consider these factors, that this could happen, right, in a small class or in a big class, and what else could have been done, right? So in the class, sometime you hit upon an idea and you execute it and it works. So in the future lesson plans, you care for that. This is what we call it, the procedure. Now, my dear students, in fact, what we did in this lecture, it was an important lecture. In fact, we discussed that you see, preparation of a teacher is a must for a class. A prepared lecture, a prepared teacher helps in fact improve the learning, the process. A prepared, in fact, language teacher does his job well as compared to an unprepared teacher. So preparation needs time, I understand this, but that preparation saves 9, right? A stitch in time saves 9. So if you prepare in advance, and that preparation would help you enjoy that lesson, that enjoy that class. Otherwise, there could be some factors. You might be in deep sea, that you won't be able to execute the class because you are not prepared, right? But if you are prepared, and particularly when there is an inspection in the class, of course, you have a department visits the class, and if he finds you that you are not prepared, so that goes against you. But if you find that you have a proper plan in front of you and you are properly executing it, so you will see the change, you will see the difference. So he will, of course, write good comments about you, that the person was prepared in the class. And preparation, of course, mind you, that when you go prepared to the class, you in fact help the learners. If you go unprepared, you confuse them, right? So ethically, of course, it is bad that if you confuse 40 students, if you confuse 20 students, so why not to prepare that? You are get paid for it, in fact. You see, I mean, you are paid for that, so you are paid for that lesson planning that you make. Either you are experienced teacher, but of course, if you prepare well, you see, that preparation, you see, helps you, of course, and that preparation is an addition to your, of course, is a value addition, particularly in your personality, and that, of course, helps you, that of course you are prepared and you are doing well in the class. So this is important. The teacher's preparation is a must. I told you that, of course, I mean, how to be a good teacher. Prepare, prepare, prepare. And with every teaching experience, we learn naturally, right? And we need to learn. Important. After every class, yes, I must ask myself, every teacher must ask, of course, himself, that you see, or herself, that what he has learned, how was the experience. And if he takes a note of that, if he writes that point in his logbook, so of course in the next class he'll be incorporating that. Sometimes it happens that the class becomes a boring class and the teacher has to think that why it was boring. You see, that's why the planning is important. So lesson plans reflects teacher's preparation. If you have a lesson plan, it shows that speaks volume for your preparation. But if you don't have a lesson plan, it shows that you are not prepared, but maybe you want to use your experience. Important. Then a clear and explicit presentation of aims and procedure by which they are achieved is very important. What are the aims, of course, right? And what would be the procedure, right? What are the different steps that you will be following, and what would be the procedure? In fact, you see, what would be the scheme that you will have, right? And at the end, of course, how would you achieve it? Then a checklist is important. What and where to teach is important, because teaching, I mean, students of corporate sector in the banks and companies, of course, they're different, and teaching students in a university, in a language center, of course, they're different. And then the timeline for each stage, the 3 P's, is important. You need to give a timeline, that exactly what is the time. You see, how much time should I give for my presentation stage? And again, I told you it depends, right? That you need to know the students' level of understanding, their background knowledge, their cultural knowledge, and only then you can decide on the time. And then their, again, practice stage is important. So give due time. And of course, I already told you that every lesson is a source of learning for you. So what you can do, that you can make a reference line. You can, of course, record for the future reference. And I mean, when you take comments, that comment can help you in your research, right? If you, I mean, tackling in fact troublemakers in the class, tackling in fact some students who are not willing to learn, yes, of course, and when you start teaching, you will come to know, you will find a mixed group sometime. Of course, in a co-ed system, particularly if you are teaching in co-education, or it's a mix, of course, if the adults are also there, fine. So, I mean, this is what is a problem, you see, teaching adults or teaching children or teaching a mixed group, teaching, in fact, girls, teaching boys only, or teaching boys and girls together. So, whatever is the experience, if you just write 3-4 sentences and you write it down, and that would definitely help you out, and you can make it your habit. You can do it. fine, and you will feel the difference. And if you have a diary, these days you have laptops with you, so you can write that down. And this technology has made life very simple. Even making a lesson plan on a paper, if you do, it's really good, right? But if you can't, you see, you have a laptop in front of you, you can make it on your screen. It's very easy. And then of course the aims are important. That what are the aims? I told you earlier that aims are general, objectives are specific. What are the aims that you want to achieve through this lesson plan, right? And in that, of course, which you will be teaching a skill or teaching a structure, which structure, and what would be the procedure, what are the different stages, and how much time you would give, and what are the teaching aids that you have available. Fine, that you have a book, you have a handout, you have a whiteboard, you have a model with you, in fact, right? So aids are important. So which aids are there, and availability of the aids, and you need to know how to handle those aids, and what could be the anticipated problems, right? We discussed that, of course, the concept problem is there, or other resource problem is there, right? So these problems we must consider. And then of course the procedure. So these are, my dear students, in fact, some of what we call them the points in this lesson plan. Overall, if you see this, in one sentence, the summary of this lecture is that preparation is a must, and lesson plan reflects your preparation, and lesson plan must have your aims. Fine. And considering the aims, you have to decide on the procedures, and of course the activities that you might use in your the teaching particularly. And then of course the timeline is also important, and above all, what your sincerity, your commitment, your proper management of the class. All these are the factors that of course help you in executing our lesson plan. And for a good lesson plan, my dear students, you see, you need to give time to it. A template can be provided by the administration. If it is not provided, you can make one for you. So in short, prepare, prepare, prepare. With this, in fact, it's time to say goodbye to you. Before I say goodbye formally, if you have any question, you can ask me the question. Yes, lesson plan. Okay, my dear, lesson plan is simple, of course, that the plan for that, you see, for that course of instruction, that what will you teach, where will you teach, and how will you teach. Fine. And in how, they mean the procedure, right? And procedure, of course, what are the different stages that you want to incorporate, and which activities would be there, and of course, and do these activities are aligned with your aims or not. If they are not aligned, that means you cannot fulfill your aims, right? So that's why, of course, whenever maybe in the interview you maybe ask this question, that supposing you are going to teach this skill, so what would be your aims? And then you have to set your aims, and then accordingly activities should be designed. Any other questions, students? Anticipated problems. Yes, when you make lesson plan, my dear students, yes, of course, you anticipate the problems, and this can be resource problem. For example, sometime you have a class and there are 4 ceiling fans working in the class, so then you see that there are 20 students, and that can be a resource problem. Or another, for example, dialectical problem, pronunciation problem, any grammatical problem, right? So these problems must be kept in mind. So students, it's a time to say goodbye to you. Thank you very much.